In this module, we will learn about mortality transitions in developed and developing countries, including the historical mortality transitions. The historical mortality transitions are referred to three periods, namely the pre-transition period, that is before the year 1850. The transition period refers to the period 1850 to 1930 or up to 1960, and the post-transitional period, that is period beyond 1960. The mortality transition in India is also discussed in the module. The mortality situation in both India and the world was very high in the past, as can be seen by examining the life expectancy at birth and crude death rate. In Europe, for example, there was a very high mortality rate during the 18th century, but progress with regard to prolonging human life was made in the beginning of the 19th century, referred to as the transition period, a very long period where rate of decline in mortality indicators increased rapidly in a few European countries, while in other regions it was not as fast, and some saw a delayed decline in mortality amongst the developed countries, with a dip in trends due to the Great Economic Depression in the period between 1930 and 1940, after which there were improvements in living conditions, nutrition, medical advancement, improvement in public health situation, sanitation facilities, etc., which increased the decline in death rate. These trends are discussed in more detail in this module. The pace of decline was much more steep in the third transition period, that is post-1960, than in the previous periods, especially in the developed countries. In the case of developing countries, decline in mortality was rapid during 1910 to 1960 because mortality decline took place during this period rather than that of the developing countries' transition path due to imported technologies, etc. However, for all countries in the world, the third transition period, that is post-1960, saw crude death rates fluctuating at low levels. In India, considered as a developing country, there was high mortality and fertility in the past, and the transition can be understood in terms of three phases. For the first official census in 1871 to 1921, from 1921 to 1951, and from 1951 to the recent period. More is discussed in the following module, but broadly we can see that the crude death rate declined at a slow pace between year 1951 to 1981, after which there was a marginal decline in crude death rate. State-wise variations are also discussed in the module. Further decline in mortality, especially in those states where there are low levels of mortality, would require special efforts by government to improve public health programs.
I am Dr. C.P. Prakasham, retired professor from International Institute for Population Sciences, Mumbai. Module 21, Mortality Transition in Developed and Developing Countries. Learning objectives. In this module, we will learn about mortality transition in developed and developing countries. 1. Historic mortality transition. 2. Transition during pre-transition period before 1850. 3. Transition period. 4. Post-transitional period 1960 onwards. 5. Mortality transition in India. Historic mortality transition. Mortality situation either in India or in the world in the past was very high, and it is understood by examining expectation of life at birth and crude death rate. The mortality transition period is divided into three broad periods. Before 1850, transition period 1850-1930 or up to 1960, and post-transition period after 1930 or 1960 plus. Though the period is given with exact years, but observing country-wise, there may be likely variation in demarcated periods. Transition during pre-transition period before 1850. It is postulated that historic transition period of mortality based on the experience of European countries. As an illustration, examining the life expectancy in Europe countries shows that 38 years before 1750 for British peerage, 40 years in Geneva around 1710, and less than 40 years in many other countries. The great demographer Stonledge 1955 has suggested that the average expectation of life at birth was around 40 in the Western countries, including Northern and Western Europe, North America and Oceania in 1850. During 18th century, the crude death rate averaged 26-29 per thousand population in Denmark, Finland, Ireland, Norway and Sweden, and the crude death rate was much higher in other European countries. During this period, Europe experienced very high mortality. Figure 1, Table 1. England and Wales also experienced high mortality during 1770-1849, range between 33-22 CDR. Transition period. The period since the beginning of the 19th century, especially 1850 onwards, it has been observed an era of progress in the prolongation of human life. Some countries, transition has taken very long period, hence it has considered from 1850-1960. The figure 2 shows clearly that the average expectation of life at birth in Europe countries, Denmark, England and Wales, France, Netherlands, Norway and Sweden during 1840-1960 increased from 41 to 72 with a marginal variation among the countries. The rate of decline in crude death rate and increase in expectation of life at birth was quite fast in 6 European countries, and it is not so in Northern Europe, Oceania and United States, though they have been categorized as developed countries. The decline in mortality had a comparatively late start in some other parts of Europe and the Soviet Union. For countries like Italy, Russia, Greece, the life expectancy improved greatly and reached around 35 to 44 years. During 1930-40, there was a dip in the trend, and this was observed due to great economic depression in the West. Later, during 1940-50, improvement in living condition, nutrition, medical advancement, improvement in public health sanitation facilities leading to better life, and expectation of life increased with decline in death rate. Table 3. From the figure 3, it was evident that mortality in the selected developed countries, Europe, declined within the range 20-10. However, the pace of decline is not steep during the 1990-1960 periods because these countries have achieved decline in mortality during past decades 1850-1900. The rate of decline was 0.875 units per year, revealed that the decline was marginal. Figure 3. Among the developed countries, CDR was low and declined up to 1950 and showed marginal increase during 1960, whereas there was a steep decline in CDR in Finland during 1910-1960. In case of developing countries, Ceylon, Taiwan, Singapore, Mauritius, the decline in mortality was fast during the period 1910-1960 because decline in mortality in these countries have taken place during this period than past. From figure 3-4, it was evident that decline in mortality in the developed countries achieved during pre-transition period and in developing countries it was in transition period. There was 2.9 point decline was observed among these developing countries during 1910-60. Figure 4 gives the declining trend in CDR in developing countries. Post-transition period 1960 and above. In the third transition period, decline mortality in majority of the countries in the world fluctuates at low level. From 1950, it is seen that in most of the countries, crude death rates have been very low, ranging from 7.5 in USSR to 13.6 in GDR. During this period, some of the European countries have on average a life expectancy more than 70 years, and there was convergence in mortality rate all over Europe. The space and timing of transition varied greatly. Figure 5. Figure 5 shows decline in mortality in the post-transitional period in Europe countries, France, Greece, Norway, Finland, England and Wales. The CDR among these countries range 7.3 to 11.8 during 1960 to 9-11.1 in 2000. This clearly indicates that mortality fluctuates at low rate among these countries. Other developed countries, namely United States, Canada, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, the mortality CDR declined and kept at low pace. Table 4. CDR declined 9.5 during 1960 to 8.7 in 2000 in the United States, whereas there is a marginal increase in CDR in Japan from 7.6 to 8.2 during this period. Mortality transition in India. India is classified as developing country because of high mortality as well as high fertility in the past. The demographic transition in India can be broadly divided into three phases, namely the period from the year of first official census 1871 to 1921, and second phase may be from 1921 to 1951, and third phase is from 1951 to recent period. In the first phase, there was marked negative or minimal growth of population coupled with considerable decadal fluctuations. The second phase, in contrast, was characterized by slow but steady growth. The crude death rate declined from around 32 deaths per 1000 population during the mid-1940s to about 21 by mid of 1960s. The life expectancy at birth increased by 14 years during the 2 decades 1951-61 and 1971-81. Following table 12.3 shows estimated mortality in India during 1951-81. The crude death rate in India declined in slow pace from 1951 to 1981 from 28.2 to 15.2 with 13 points decline during 3 decades. However, during 1981-2013, there was marginal decline from 12.5 to 7.2, 5 points in CDR, figure 6. Further decline in mortality requires special efforts by improving public health programs. The average expectation of life at birth during 1881-1920 was around 25 years and 25.3 for males and 25.6 for females because of significantly heavy mortality during the last 19th and early 20th century. Infant mortality was around 200 in the country with high fluctuations, but 1989. After 1920, there was a rapid decline in death rate and increase in expectation of life at birth, figure 7. It has been attributed to improvement in public health conditions in India. However, there exists disparity in expectation of life at birth by age and urban-rural areas. It was observed that life expectancy at birth was faster in all the states during the period 1980 and slowed down during the period 1990s. Among all the states, Kerala is experiencing steady decline in expectancy at birth during 1980-1990 and slowed down during 1990 and further. Life expectancy at birth in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar did not improve at the expected rate and stands high. Table 7 shows the improvement in expectancy at birth in Indian states during 1970-2001 by sex and place of residence. Life expectancy of male in Indian states in rural area, table 7 shows that Himachal Pradesh, Haryana, Kerala and Punjab, there is a marked increase in life expectancy at birth in rural areas from 48 plus to more than 63.1 during 1970-75 to 1997-2001. Similarly, in Kerala and Punjab, life expectancy for females increased from 47 plus to 67.7 during 1970-75 to 1997-2001. This shows mortality in rural and Kerala and Punjab declined in both the sex and increases in expectancy of life at birth is an indirect indicator of improvement of health in these two states. Questions. 1. Discuss the decline in mortality during pre-transition period. 2. Discuss the decline in mortality during transition period in developed and developing countries. 3. Discuss the mortality transition in India in the past. These are the following important references where you can refer for this module. Thank you very much.
Europe, we are living longer than ever. In fact, life expectancy now exceeds 80 years in most EU member states, thanks to steady improvements in health, innovative technologies, new treatments and prevention. However, beyond the encouraging averages lie stark differences, both within and between European countries. While Europeans live longer, the extra years are not always spent in good health. While the chances for survival from cancer, heart attacks and strokes are higher than ever, around 50 million, mostly aged over 65, still suffer from 2 or more of these chronic conditions. And 500,000 people of working age still die from them every year.
That have we been able to conquer communicable diseases but somehow been left out when we talk about non-communicable disease, when it comes to diseases of the heart and lungs and other such like? First you and then you, ma'am.
I think what happened is over the years there was a lot of focus on the communicable disease. So there was a lot of thrust and creating awareness about the communicable diseases, whether they came from whatever the source. And I think the public health policies, and which was a big effort. So those, the public, whether it is urban or rural, compromised or not compromised, or the affluent, have got a hang of it and have understood that this is how it is caused, this is the impact, and this is what happens. But as a result, I feel the non-communicable diseases have not had so much of an impact, and maybe we've not been able to create an awareness, number one. Number two, I think the lifestyle diseases or the compromised, the scenarios differ in different areas of the country.
So we can't generalize.
We can't, and I think the lifestyle terminology is okay for some people who are living in the affluent or the other upper class. They are the ones who are going to suffer primarily a lot from these non-communicable diseases.
Right.
Poor lifestyle issues.
Absolutely. Have we sort of been left behind when it comes to non-communicable disease? Do you agree with what Doctor had to say?
Yes, I agree. And I think that we have been left behind because quite apart from our neighbors, if you look at the BRIC countries, we're the rock bottom there also.
There as well, yeah.
So it's a phenomena where we call ourselves low, middle, the lower in the, and middle in the lower income bracket. But we are very, very low when we look at the health indices. And certainly this non-communicable diseases is something that's going to hit us, and that's going to take away a lot of money when we've not crossed the hump, the double burden of what Rajiv just talked about. And there I would say a lot of attention was paid to tuberculosis control, to malaria control. HIV we've been able to control, considering what India was supposed to be facing. We have not really had to face that. That is because not only money was spent, but a lot was done for awareness building. It became a kind of a passion and a mission with not only the Ministry of Health, but the state governments. I think here the NCD problem is definitely one of awareness building. State governments are not paying the kind of attention that they need.